Yep. There you go. Thank you. And so, yeah.
All right.
I guess I'm going to stop talking and let you talk.
Thank God.
I know. I hate it.
I'm just kidding. All right. So, yeah, I'm just going to share some of the experience, some of the things that we're experimenting on. But ultimately, we're just looking at, how can we use generative AI to really help speed up some of our processes, right? So that's what the gist of this conversation is. We're not talking about replacing UX roles, replacing product roles, but ultimately, how do we use this to speed up our process and then get deeper insights as we go through? So, have your camera on? I do. But before we do, I'd like everybody to go up to that Miro board. So what we want to do is we want your thoughts, right? So one of the things that we want to do is capture some ideas. So I want you to get, one of the instructions we're going to put is, we want you to put your thought on a Post-it note. So in this case, that thought is, as we're going through some of the education, some of the things that we're seeing that people are using generative AI for, if you come up with an idea, let's put it up and let's document it on Miro. And then we want one thought per Post-it note. So what I always say is, if you have a comma, create a new Post-it note. If you see yourself adding and or, create a new Post-it note. All right, cool. So we're gonna have like a quick little icebreaker. I'm gonna try something new. So what I'd like to do is, if everybody can come over, I'm gonna pull you guys to me.
You may need to share that.
Oh, right.
I'm not sure how it will, if people joining later will get it.
You got it. So let's see. I'm going to share this link one more time.
Just in case.
Yes, sir. All right, so come join us. We're going to do a Mad Lib kind of exercise, and Matt's going to do something behind the scenes, or I might do it. I don't know. So if you guys, we want to get nouns and adjectives. So who wants to be a noun? Go to the noun and get me a blue Post-it note. I want you to enter one Post-it note into that. Just what's a good noun? It could be anything from a persona, a person, whatever it is. And then somebody go over to the adjectives. Let's get some groups going over the adjectives. Tell me, describe these nouns for us. So let's just have a little bit fun. If you're an adjective, put it over to the right. If you're a noun, put it over to the left.
How many per?
All right, just one per person. And if anybody wants to contribute to adjectives, we got tons of nouns, so. All right, so we're not going to spend too much time on this, but we're going to use a generative AI tool that Miro just launched, and where we can just cluster this, right? So instead of having to affinity the map this within ourselves, we can quickly go in. So I'm going to let everybody just kind of finish up
a little bit, like just kind of
in a second.
That particular, what normally we would do.
Yeah, what normally we would do is, we'd sit here and work as a team to find similarities across this content, right? So I'm not saying AI is going to replace it. We'll talk about that in the education. But this is going to be a fun activity. The outcome of this activity is just to get everybody to participate. So this is something that you can adopt in your design thinking workshops. Like, we've found this to be very useful, is create an icebreaker up front just to get everybody comfortable with the tool. And then we use it also to train them how to affinity map. And so if we were to do this without AI, we'd sit here and look at all of these and find similarities, right? So robots, dragons, bears, things like that, that we can decide how are we going to organize all this. So what I'm going to do right now, just to speed things up, and I'll show you guys later on. I'm not going to share my screen at this point because I want to stay within the presentation. But Miro has a clustering by keyword. And so ultimately we can look at organizing all this content using that keyword. And I missed one, sorry. Skunk seems to be on its own. And then I'm going to use that for the adjective. So we're just going to determine whichever one of these has, whatever one of these Dolph Lundgren. What the?
He's awesome.
I'm gonna choose. How about we do scruffy, boiling, burning blank? I like that. So we're gonna use that, Matt. Matt's gonna combine this. So what we're gonna do is and then on the left we got a hippo, a bear, and a cat. Let's choose the hippo. And so Matt's gonna do a fun he's gonna engage generative AI to create a scruffy, boiling, burning blank burstable hippo.
So I can
Yeah, you got it. So I'm gonna put it down here. I like the word hippo. So Matt's gonna prompt the hippo. We're gonna see what a scruffy, boiling, burning, blank, burstable hippo looks like. All right. While Matt does that, we're gonna get into the education. So let's go ahead and go back. Great job, guys. We'll see what Matt comes up with.
You want me to run it through the dream?
Yes, sir.
Imagine.
All right. All right. So really quick. So this is something that I'm not going to go too deep in, but I just want to, so as we're going through this, if you guys come up with like an idea, I want you guys to generate some ideas on how you can apply generative AI to your current workflow to solve something, to make yourself more efficient, or maybe you're already doing it. So then I want, if you could, start putting it in the Miro board. So actually, let me share the Miro. Hold on. Let's see. Okay, here we are. So I'm going to share this Miro board just to kind of show you where I'd like you to put your ideas. So over to the right, right next to our Mad Libs, if you can start as I'm going through the education, as you're starting to generate ideas on how you can use AI within your workflow, right? So I want you guys to, oh, I love that. Who just did that? That's amazing. Thank you, Marissa. Just start dropping them in here. If you guys have a notebook at home or on your desk, like just start writing those down. But I'd love to get one or two ideas from the team, and then you'll see what we'll do with that once we get into that. So, all right. Any questions? Cool. Let me switch over to my presentation. All right. So some of some of AI's capabilities, right? So we've understood the conversational side of that. That's kind of been in play for some time, but it's gotten better. But it's basically being able to provide like a question or comments. You see this a lot in customer service type activities where a customer or human asks a question and then they're provided with either a tool or an answer to that question. So that's a conversational AI. Text summarization is something that a lot of companies are asking for and a lot of people are doing. So imagine from a user research perspective, if you were able to look at all the user insights that you got, the usability tests, maybe you did a ton of usability tests, you got a ton of notes that you captured, maybe you're doing speech to text, you could engage the AI to summarize the findings of what you did. Another way that you can summarize that is maybe through comments, right? So if you have a long list of comments or customer inquiries or things like that, you could summarize what are some of the biggest pain points, what's the sentiment as it relates to the copy or the text that you provide. So that's another method. The key information extraction, that's another, just like being able to look at unstructured information. So when we say unstructured information, there's nothing that's telling you this is a noun, this is an adjective, but ultimately it can look at paragraphs of text and just really structure it into specific ways, right? So what would that be? Like, like unstructured dates, right? To be able to identify dates within a piece of text or conversations, and then structure it so that you can do something with it, so that you can filter it, or you can modify it, whatever it is. Text generation, you're seeing a lot of that through copywriting, social media, things like that, creating copy and being able to then get some stuff. So like I'm using it a lot of the times to generate some of my PowerPoint presentations, right? So like I need to create like a quick one sentence description of lean UX, I'll engage it in that and then just kind of come back and be able to create some of that copy. But we'll talk about like, how do you modify, how do you change your prompts in order to do that? Has anybody been using any of the text generation? Anybody want to share like some things that you've experienced? Or if not, make sure those ideas are getting put into that board. So we're gonna, the first part of this is education, like I said, and then you'll see me fumbling through and try to figure out how we come up with a solution for whatever idea that you have.
I'm trying to get into this.
Yeah. Image generation, that's huge, right? So that's where you're seeing a lot of like Adobe Firefly and all the different products that are coming out, Mid-Journey, things like that, where you can actually fill in and create imagery. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the things and some of the challenges in there. Coding, right? So we're, at Neudesic, we're experiencing with a lot of our experienced developers, they're using Copilot, which is a Microsoft product, but ultimately helping them really build out and create coding and develop on that. You can actually engage a chat GPT to create code for you and things like that. So, but a lot of the times it's like inline coding or best practices. There's also been some use cases where you have an existing platform that's no longer going to be supported. Like, could we merge that? Could we engage generative AI to convert that to a supported language? So there's been some discussions around that. So then ultimately, again, coding, translation, and then text translation, like translating from one language to another. I'm still engaging, like, I think, let me see, can you check the chat? Can I get somebody to monitor that? Marissa, you're monitoring the chat, right? So let me know if there's anybody that's got some ideas, and make sure, guys, like, I think we're all exploring this at the same time. And ultimately just trying to figure out how can AI make us better, right? How can it make us more efficient? So I wanted to talk about, kind of like some underlying, I'm not going to go into too deep into this in the technical side, but you'll hear like LLMs, which are large language models. That's what the underlying, model that, Chat GPT, for example, or some of the things that you're seeing from Google and Mid-Journey, stability, things like that. But I wanted to talk about, your private data versus public data, right? So when we're looking at like Chat GPT, they make it publicly available. You can now opt out from it using your public data as a model, but they've created their own proprietary AI model to be able to analyze and decipher a lot of that information, right? Then there's the private, right? You could train your own model, which requires a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money. And then you have products like Microsoft, Azure OpenAI, and other products where it creates a platform for you to use your private data and then utilize the power of a proprietary AI model like OpenAI without sharing your data. And that's ultimately some of the stuff that we've been engaging with our clients on. So somewhere in the middle. But for today's conversation, I'm just going to talk about the publicly available features, right? So that like we're trying to go where there's limited code. You could, if you're looking at creating like an enterprise solution or something for your organizations, you're probably going to want to engage with something like Azure OpenAI, where you're setting things up. And I think I see Jason Fox on there. So he's one of our lead tech, he's our VP. What are you? Our solution, I don't even know what your title is, but you're like God of technology, technology in the desert. But he knows a lot of those details. That's not what this conversation is about, right? But make sure if you guys have some questions on some of the underlying technology and how it works, I think for today, what I want to do is how can we apply it to our everyday lives? How can we make ourselves efficient? How can we utilize it to a point that makes us better than we were before? Any questions before I move on? So We know some of the popular image generators. Today's conversation isn't about image creation. It isn't about image manipulation, right? It's about how can you utilize some of these features that these generative AI tools have in order to speed up your processes. But we know, you've heard of Midjourney, Dolly. You've heard of Dolly as well as like something that from the chat GPT, or no, I'm sorry, from GPT, not chat. OpenAI, Dolly 2 is an OpenAI product. Then also we've played and tinkered with Adobe Firefly. Then you got Stability AI, and then Leonardo AI. I think one of the biggest opportunities here for us from a user experience standpoint is how do we make this available to the masses, right? So we're going to talk about some of the details, like if you guys already experimented with some of the prompt engineering, you'll see that there's like many methods that you can create. You see these prompts that people are generating that are paragraphs long, that are very specific. I think the easier we can enable others to be able to create that with little friction is probably where the experience is going to be very highly touted as far as being able to do that. I saw Leonardo, for example. So like, for example, like Mid-Journey, you've got to engage and understand what can you do, what can't you do, and really look through a lot of their documentation. Adobe Firefly does kind of guide you on how you can prompt, so I think they did a good job. Leonardo.ai, from my experience, it's good at setting you up to create prompts and to guide you on how to create really accurate prompts. But the underlying technology is pretty bad. Like I've experienced where it's, it doesn't respond back and things like that. But I think the UX team, whoever came up with guiding you and understanding like what can you do, what kind of style could you ask for, what kind of camera could you be using, things like that. And we'll talk a little bit about what we've learned from some of the prompts and just analyzing some of the things that you can do from a prompt engineering perspective. Any questions so far? So again, today is not about image manipulation. It's not about filling in backgrounds and things like that. We'll definitely have to follow back and kind of look at some of the capabilities from a photography and design perspective. So some of the things that we need to learn, right? So if you guys already kind of looked into some of these generative AI tools, there's things called hallucinations, and also there's biases that this AI, right? So it's been trained with information that was created by us, by humans, right? And entered into either the web or technology or things like that. So one of the things that we need to be careful about is really being able to analyze and decipher whether this is a hallucination and bias. Now, like through imagery, it makes sense, right? So I've showed some examples like on this first one. On this first example, there's an extra, I don't even know, I think that's an extra leg. I don't know what that is. And so that's what we call hallucination. It's easier to see in imagery, but it's probably harder to see when you in text, right? When it generates text, if you don't understand the information, if you don't understand what's right or what's wrong, you might be introducing something that is inaccurate. So that could be a hallucination where it says the sky's red and it's thinking, at 6:50 p.m. the sky is red. Yes, that's true, but it's not always red.
Right.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen where it desperately wants to agree with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oftentimes it will create a scenario where you are right, but it isn't.
Yep. So at the end of the day, we still want to be able to validate this. It's not like we're just going to turn our brains off. It's just another tool that's going to help us achieve more than we've been able to achieve in the past. But yeah, so like, has anybody had any experiences with some hallucinations and biases?
Yes. I think sometimes it adds like, are you talking about sometimes it will add like an extra finger or something like that?
Yep. I know. Yeah. So and there's ways that you can guide it, right? There's ways that you can guide it depending on the tool, right? So like Midjourney has specific count. You can tell it how many fingers you want, how many people you want, and you just you have to learn what that language is. You know, like here's another example where I added a post note to this person's elbow. This one is somebody screaming into a camera lens that's converted to a megaphone. I don't even know. But ultimately, just want to make sure that we're aware of that. There's a lot of biases also. We'll kind of play with some of it, but you know, like being specific about what you wanted to do. And then how are we responsible, right? So we want to make sure that we protect and any private information, right? You got to make sure that you understand what the terms and conditions are, and how do they handle the data that you're providing. So making sure that, you know, in the case of you using tools such as Chat GPT, such as Adobe Firefly, things like that, understand that when you provided things, what are they doing with that information, and how are they keeping your information private? And then be able to be transparent. So again, this is where user experience comes into play, right? Being able to show and show so you've seen this in various examples where it tells you how it came to that information, right? Instead of just giving you an answer, it says, here's how I came to that information. There's a lot of usability type response things that we can apply here from a user experience standpoint. The human oversight, right? How do we make sure that we understand how things are being generated? How is it making those connections, right? And things like that. That's another usability problem that a human problem that we can solve for, that we're all trying to figure out at this point. There's been some tools out there and things like that. There's a lot of debate on copyright and such, so on and so forth. So we're probably going to go through a lot of that in the next coming years, but just being able to be aware of this. And when you guys are engaging with some of these tools and services, just make sure that you're not sharing anything that's private. So we've been kind of working with customers on our end, and we've gotten a ton of examples of use cases. I didn't put all of these in here, but you know, I think we talked about it. So make sure, guys, just a reminder, start putting some of those use cases that you just came up with, some of those ideas that we're going through. It's going to be important for like the second half of this. So some of the things that I've seen and we've had our customers really engage us on is how does it create marketing copy, right? How do we create micro copy? How do we create copy for social media in the right tone and the right voice? You know, how do we create documentation out of that, right? How do we create training workflows? How do we forecast, right? So what if, you know, a lot of the ideas that are coming in is, you know, what if it had access to all our data and it could forecast, it could you know, predictively tell us that something's going to happen in 6 months, you should start preparing for this, or automatically send us a report or something like that. So then also looking at, you know, a lot of like documentation, there's a lot of organizations with a lot of unstructured information. How can we use it to extract some of that information and identify maybe risks, or to organize it in a way that it's structured? So information analysis, HR, right? HR, what if you could, you know, a lot of these tools that even, you know, like Teams and all these other tools, they're starting to come out with some AI capabilities where it kind of shows, you know, kind of helps you understand what's the sentiment of your team. Are they happy? Are they angry? You know, things like that, and be able to analyze some of that data. So just, I wanted to share some ideas. Let's get some of those ideas on the Miro board if you haven't already. And then we'll continue going through some of that stuff. So any questions or any thoughts on some of the use cases that we've applied, or anybody want to share some use cases that maybe your company or your team's applying?
Hi, this is Eduardo. Maybe not only use cases, but just to share a couple of things related to the responsible AI you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we're noticing is, especially now that they are connecting like GPT engines with things like Bing or some other type of search engine, is that the search is also going to be as good as the search result you're going to get. For example, let's say that I have a query about information, and let's say I was playing with this the other day where I was asking for recommendations for cell phones, and Bing came back and said, okay, here are the top 3 phones that I would recommend, and gave me sources. When I opened the sources, none of the sources actually matched the recommendations that the GPT came back with.
Wow.
And it was because, if you notice or you look at it carefully, the recommendations were from older models. So I think what happened was because this was like some pretty obscure blog references, probably Bing doesn't spend the time going and re-indexing very often. So the answer was stale, but the sources or the references were okay.
Yeah.
So we're definitely running into situations like that. And also you mentioned the bias. We came across it in a couple of instances. Like, for example, we were asking like who won Wimbledon in 2023, and it came back with a men's champion or the winner for men's single. There was another one where they were asking you to produce a chart. It was like a whole table of data, and said, okay, can you give me distribution between genders? And he came back with like a percentage of male, percentage of female. It put it in blue and pink.
Yeah.
So like, okay, I can see some bias here. So definitely it's still happening.
Yeah, I mean, you still have to filter through some of that stuff. And I mean, that, like, I just, I think with your relevant information, like links, for example, I don't think it does really good with that, right? That's precise information.
Yeah.
Where it does do good, it was where like creativity, right? And methodology and things like that. Like,
I was exploring a plugin for links, like where it will actually explore a website
oh, right, where
specifically and extract information out of it without having to. Now
Yeah.
that will only be as good as their
well,
content.
but you're providing the link versus this,
I
like
provide the link.
there's still some corners that we need to fill. I mean, that comes to the precision, right? So how precise does the answer have to be?
I didn't try 2 links. That might be interesting. Or any website that deals
We had some guys here, like they did a hackathon, and they did something like that but it came back to tell you what's the sentiment and how I don't want to say accurate, but how reputable is the information that was provided. So they did that with articles, which was kind of cool.
On the topic of like summarizing articles that you like put into some sort of AI, I found this really interesting resource called Recast. And what it does is it like goes through an article and it changes the format to a podcast style conversation between 2 people. And so you can just like paste any articles that might be sent in
That's
like your
awesome.
Slack channel, and it turns it into a podcast. It makes it really enjoyable to like stay up to date on what everyone's sharing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah,
It works
everybody-
pretty well too.
It put the link to those kind of things in the mirror board if you like.
Yeah, I'll put that up.
I just want to kind of like follow up on, you mentioned like for creativity, AI is definitely more useful in generating more like usable materials than looking for something more realistic. Photography, like photos, generating like real photo or content that's more like realistic. I think like especially for entertainment or like gaming creation, a lot of assets created by AI is actually like very cool.
yeah.
So it's more useful that way.
Yeah, what I meant, like the precision is, if you need the same response every single time, it's not going to do it, right? Like if you're but it is creative in the sense that it explores and there's like different controls that you can give it, right? Like how far beyond just the request that you're giving it should it explore past that? So yeah, good point. Did you drop that use case in there from a gaming perspective? Like,
Well, I will right now.
yeah, awesome. So in today's conversation, I was like, because we've been doing a lot of like, so the way we engaged our customers is through a design thinking workshop, because a lot of people don't know what are, they don't know what they're gonna do with this. They don't have a generative AI strategy. And as I was sitting there, I started making a correlation between AI and design thinking. So as we're looking at like what we do from a design thinking perspective, I came to you guys and I had a prompt, write down some nouns, right? So I engaged you, this group. How many people do we have here? Like over 20 plus, or I don't know, 37, right? So me as an individual engaged this group of 37 to come up with as many nouns as possible.
You want to see that one? You want to see that picture?
I like it. Do you have it?
Yeah.
All right. So I've engaged you. And so I engaged you guys and I prompted you as a group, 37 brains all put together. And this is what we came up with. And Matt's going to show us this beautiful image that we came up with. Are you going to share your screen?
No, I'll put it on the.
Okay, he's going to share it. So anyway, so my point is, I started making the correlation between the activity of design thinking with AI. So how can we empower our methods and processes using AI, right? So that we go from 37 to millions and billions of experiences, right? And so that's what we're gonna try to engage in today. And really looking at how do we tap into AI to help us with our design thinking process, and then also help us with creating context with the various personas that we use. I don't want to move forward until Matt shares this beautiful image. You did?
Yeah, it's on. Camera.
Where is it? Oh, you put it in the Miro. Okay, hold on. I'm going to share this. Let's all experience this together. That's awesome.
Funny thing is, Marissa did it as well, and it came up with very similar pictures. If you wanted to put yours in there,
So it says
like
it's gruffy,
almost exactly.
boiling, burning, blank,
I guess they only had one picture.
burstable hippo. That's awesome.
I like the one at the bottom right.
Yeah, that's what came up from mine.
Oh, you had a style to it. You must.
Yeah.
I didn't give it a lot of parameters. You know, like I didn't enhance it with other
So
features.
you got to share that. Put it in the mirror.
Yeah, put it in the mirror board. 'Cause it's definitely different, and put in what you like entered in there.
Yeah.
So the challenge today is, how do we incorporate AI, specifically Chat GPT and Mid-Journey, and also Chat GPT's plugin called Storybird.ai, to put together a user flow for whatever we're about to solve, right? So before we get there, I wanted to talk about some of the things that we've observed, right? So if we're looking at, so like there's a ton of, and I'll share some videos and some links, but just talking about how you prompt, right? So when we're talking about the usability and the experience, a lot of the times you're presented with a empty field and you don't know what to say. So then you put scruffy, hairy, burstable hippos, and then you let the AI interpret what you meant by that. But as you start getting more precise, you can then provide context, right? So if you look at a prompt, you can provide context, provide it documents, provide it sketches, maybe tell it, following this sketch, can you create a hippo for me? You can provide it an image, or you can provide it actual text, right? And then how to think. You can tell it how to think. You can tell it to think like a doctor, to think like a scientist, to think like an artist, right? You can also ask it to think like a certain methodology, lean UX, product canvas, business canvas, right? So you're telling it how you want to think through it. And then you can ask it how to respond. So I got some examples on how you can respond. So the one shot is the one that we're very much familiar with, where you just tell it to create a hippo and it responds and it creates a hippo. where you ask it, hey, tell me everything I need to know about Six Sigma, and it responds back and it writes like what Six Sigma is all about, right? You can also ask it to guide you through some steps. Guide me through the lean UX process, guide me through the lean product process. You can actually give it steps, right? So what we're gonna try today is to give it some steps, and it's gonna guide us and walk us through those steps. And then acknowledge receipt. You can actually tell it, instead of responding, and you will see that too, you can tell it to either set something or save something, right? So instead, you're not looking for a response. All you're looking for is to memorize or to remember this content. So I might give it some context in the sense of here's some comments that I found on this product. Respond when you've saved this, or respond when you've confirmed. Respond with a yes once you've received this information, because we're not asking it to do anything with that information, but just to keep it within context. We could also ask it for a tone, like what kind of tone do we want the response in, and most of this is in copy or things like that. So like, do we want it to be persuasive, argumentative, things like that? So it's really, and I don't have, like, the possibilities are endless, but just understanding, like, this is how you could structure your prompt. You can actually tell it to, like, what kind of style, like cyberpunk, photographic, fantasy art, things like that. What kind of tools should they be using? Are they using calligraphy? Are they using, I want to install the camera with this kind of lens? Like, I don't know if Jason Fox is still in, but he's also experienced that. He's a photographer. So he knows the aperture, he knows all this stuff. So he's going to do that. He also knows lighting and aspect ratio. You can tell it that, like, each one, right? Mid-Journey. And once you get into the specs, you got to understand the tool that you're using. So like Mid-Journey, you're able to specify aspect ratio, right? Give it understanding what quantity, how many humans do I want on this? How many male versus female do I want in the photo? How many fingers should they have? Things like that. What's the angle? What's the position of the sun? What's the position of my camera? Things like that, right? And then another piece is variables. So I know I didn't cover everything. I know there's more, but does anybody else have any other, like, things that you've experienced from a prompt perspective that you would add to this list?
Well,
One thing,
Good. Go ahead.
oh, one thing I have done is adding like emotional adjectives. And then it's funny, like I was helping like a client generating an image for like a online book or like a blog, and then using all the prompt, it just generating very sad images. So she yeah, it looks all very
Exactly.
depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we try to like add on like happy or like emotional, like kind of like descriptive like words on it, but it all generate very weird so for example, if you type happily walking, and then like the image kind of turn out like just strangely with like walking with like a smiling face, which is not like the way we will express feelings or express happy. So yeah, I think one category might be like emotional descriptive words.
Yeah, I like that. Like
Like
emotions.
content,
Yeah,
or
content.
what would be better? Like
Indifference.
how do you walk down the street? Do you go
With purpose.
Giddy. No,
That's
that's good.
exactly.
Yeah.
I like
Well, I
that.
do that.
I'm gonna add that to your emotion. Anybody else?
That's what people should describe you. I like the lens thing. I did try that out a lot, by saying, specifically, I'm gonna use a Canon 70-200 f2.8.
Yeah.
And you can even probably put in the actual model number, and I'm gonna use a Mark II, D6,
Yeah.
so then who knows if it does what it does, like how would I be able to compare, but.
I mean, like, the possibilities are endless, right?
Mhm.
Like, that's how, like, I don't have a full list, but just, like, that's how you can get more precise and get more consistent responses from, you know, creating content or things like that. Now, that's where, you know, from a experience and technology perspective, right? We're nerding out on this. Like, how do we make this available to the everyday person, right?
The prompt I put, and if anybody wants to put a prompt example that they've done, a complex one, I was exploring ChatGPT to make my prompt
Yep.
for me. So I was kind of giving it some ideas and things that I would want to see, and maybe even my asking was getting a little long too, you know, it's kind of like it was filling it in. But yeah, a lot of the prompts that I was playing around with, it was like creating for me. It definitely helped.
I think that's another one, right? Is just engaging ChatGPT to help you create those prompts. Is I've seen a lot of people using that. That's a good one.
I've been using it a lot with campaign schedules, like campaign topics, to be able to help me decide how I want to approach the last weeks of this year.
Yeah.
And it's informative. You know, some of it's like, oh, I wouldn't say that, so I'm like gonna remove those, but like, or that it's not relevant, but it does help kind of get it out there so people
Yeah.
can think through it.
So let's give it a try, right? So here's what I'm gonna try to do. And you guys are gonna see me either fumble through this, or it's gonna be like the most amazing thing you've ever seen. But ultimately, I think the biggest thing is, like, someone comes to you with an idea. How do you create something to document it and to capture that idea, right? You probably need to engage their users, right? But, you know, situations like us, you know, it might be an RFP that we're not allowed to talk to their users, right? Or we're not allowed to talk and ask questions that are not included in the RFP. Or maybe also situations where they're like, there's no way I'm going to let you speak to the users because they already hate us. And that's why we're engaging you guys. And they're going to be like, why wouldn't you start with us first before you created this beautiful application that completely sucks, right? So we're not saying replace actual user interviews and actual user research, but you can subsidize this and use AI in order to help you kind of get that collaboration, that engine going. So, all right, let's give it a try. So I'm gonna go back. Do we have any ideas in here? Any use cases? Well, before we do that, does anybody have any questions or any thoughts on, or anything that you feel like we should go deeper into that that you guys would like to learn more about?
Hi, I'm Chetan, and I was just wondering, like, I see a lot of roles opening up for prompt engineering. I'm not sure if the right question to ask, but I just wanted to understand, like, could anyone explain what prompt engineering is as a profession which was coming out recently?
Yep. So yeah, so prompt engineering is just basically everything that I just told you right now, like with all the pieces in there. So when you're doing the prompt engineering, you're putting in some rules to the underlying code. So like, imagine underneath Chat GPT, there's some rules underneath it, right? To create that precision. And it's really just determining what are those rules is what a prompt engineer does. And how do I apply them in a way that that response comes back consistently, right? So it's really understanding, like, how do I engage the model? What's the model's capabilities? And where do I need to put some constraints around it, right? Is from what we're still exploring it ourselves, but that's what I understand. And that's what I've experienced as we've got, everybody's like maybe 6 months. Some people are like 10 years into this, and those guys are few and far between, right? But for the most of us, like, we're like 6 months into this trying to explore it. And that's the prompt engineering, is how do I pull in the right context, right? How do I pull in the right data in a secure manner so that I can engage the model with that? So hopefully that helped.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, in case it helps, kind of the other trend that we're starting to see as well is the role is starting to evolve very rapidly. So exactly, it started like that when you had to understand the models and started to understand the wording, but now it's starting to get into almost like data science. Okay, I want to try different variants of my prompt, which one is performing better?
Yes.
And also everything we'll be talking about of creating guidelines is like a pre-GPT processing as well as a post-GPT processing. So like cleaning up the data, injecting additional context as part of the prompt itself. And then you go and execute the prompt. And then once the prompt comes back, it's any type of cleanup, analysis, validation, provenance check. So anything you have to do. So it's now you're basically building almost like AI pipelines. So that's kind of the role that I'm seeing now. These prompt engineers are starting to do. Even translation of prompts from one model to the next. So for example, if you have prompts that work with GPT 3.5 Turbo, and then you move into GPT-4, it's worth revisiting the prompts, because now that you have more tokens, you can inject more context, you can do more things in a single prompt. You might need to revisit them, or vice versa. If you have to scale back to a different model, you have to readapt your prompts to work better with the model. So yeah, it's getting very complex very quickly.
Yeah, it's pulling back in like people that are, like to your point, people that are in data that they're originally doing, like a lot of those people are like definitely got a leg up on this.
So I have a question. Sorry, Danny, can I ask you a question? As far as so the data, the asking, kind of using it to leverage insights into the data, but how, given the going back to the security of the data, how I guess would that be using the Azure OpenAI, so that would be using the private data method that you talked about at the beginning? Because yes, it would be great, but we can't use the public version of it.
Well, so you're engaging it in a safe environment through a mitigation, like the OpenAI, Azure OpenAI, right? So that's your go-between, and you're still using the model that ChatGPT is using, but it's available in a sense that you're not sharing private information. It's not publicly available. So and that's where data strategy and governance and security come into play. So it's still the same approach as if you were doing a data and AI strategy, but now you're bringing in a model like ChatGPT or what's Google's, Bard. Yeah, like Bard and things like that, right? So it's through that interface with, and Microsoft and OpenAI had been collaborating on this for some time, so they were one of the first to launch that. But there's definitely lots of services that are coming to light that provide that capability for enterprises.
There's other stuff where people are bringing in their own data models and then using frameworks like Llama Index to aggregate those models, including the open platforms. So now we're having even more complex systems that are creating specialty scenarios for internal private companies.
Yeah. And that's an expensive endeavor, just because you're there's some details that I didn't go into, but like basically once you engage in something like Microsoft OpenAI, you're paying per, I forget per credit, right? They got a credit, and I think the way that they described it is, think of it like 4 to 8 characters is 1 credit. And so that's not expensive when you're engaging the model, but when you're teaching the model, that's when it starts kind of blowing up, because you're paying for that learning, or the computing power it takes to learn. But that's we could probably get some of our guys to come in and kind of go deep in that.
Well, it's really looking at the 3 different core aspects of data, right? You have the unstructured data, you have semi-structured data, and structured data. And so those 3 different types are going to really change the way that your use cases are.
Yeah.
Like if I'm creating a very specific tool that is hyper-focused on converting SQL to data visualizations, that is very structured data that you're looking at. So when someone gives a standard English prompt, it has to now spit out something that has to be exact every time, even though you could be asking that question 5 different ways. So you might actually, in that instance, want to remove different types of data from the LLM. And so there's a lot of subtraction now that's being thought about. How you would apply this from like a business perspective.
Yeah, there's a ton of overhead that you're gonna have to like take on if you're gonna create your own LLM, for sure. But I think for the most part, like we're kind of, a lot of customers are asking us if they can use OpenAI and how do they do it securely. And so like our answer is to engage, in something like Microsoft's Azure OpenAI that kind of helps kind of separate that gives you that protection.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest drivers not to move forward with some of this stuff too. With some of these companies,
Yeah,
just so unsure of the regulations around it.
Yeah.
So now, not even just being able to secure their own data, but then there's like the whole regulatory system that may or may not come down on it.
Yeah.
And halt it or truncate it a little bit.
That's why I think healthcare doesn't touch it.
Right.
Right. They don't even know where to begin or end with that. So
we've had a lot of companies do a knee-jerk reaction where like after we do our workshop, our education and workshop, all of a sudden there's like an email to the entire organization saying that they just shut down generative and then we have to come back and be like, no. And I always liken it to like when social media was introduced and everybody's like, what, we can't control what people say about our products? No social media. And so like the first adopters that understood how to harness social media were the winners. They won, right? So like I think that's where we're at with, even just as an employee, like you need to figure out how do you make yourself faster, more efficient, with this new tool that's being provided to us, right? Which is a good segue. Let's see how productive Danny Robles is today. So here's what I'm going to try to do. Here's one of the things that we're going to decide on a use case, right? We're going to go to the Miro board and we're going to decide we're going to use Miro's ability to affinity map for us. And I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But what I want to do is something that we do like on a day, like whenever we do ideation sessions, we have these artifacts that we have to follow up with. We create a hypothesis in this format, as you see here, just to identify. So somebody comes up with us a use case of whatever it is. It doesn't have to be generative AI. It could be anything. And we ask them to do crazy 8 sketching, and then we follow up and we have like this beautiful presentation that has, here's your hypothesis, and then here's the storyboard that you guys created. So what I'm going to engage AI in is first, we're going to decide what we're building today. Then the output's going to be a hypothesis. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys hear anything I said?
No.
No.
Man, it was very powerful. No. So we're gonna try. I don't know if you guys saw that slide, the last slide that we had. So this slide, so we do these workshops and we come back and we create these artifacts to document what happened inside the workshop. So in this case, what I'm gonna engage AI into doing is helping me create the hypothesis, come out with some insights, create an empathy map for me that I can then put into this presentation. And then I'm going to actually have it create a storyboard for me. And then we're going to try this brand new plugin called storyboard.ai to create a storyboard for me that then we can put into this presentation so that we can use it to sell whatever we decide on, right? Whatever use case we decide to solve today, we're going to have an artifact that we'll create in a short amount of time. Okay, let's try it. So let's go to the Miro board. The Miro board. All right, so we got some cool ideas that people were putting in here. I'm just going to use Miro's tool here, and we're just going to cluster by keyword. And we're going to go after the most generate placeholder image, read code, and generate product documentation. So read code, I like this. Read code and generate product recommendation. Resume specific creation to resume creation to job description. I like that. Create game assets with prompts. Which one do you guys want to do? Should we do game assets with prompts or read code and generate product documentation? I'm not going to do a vote. Let's just choose one. Just want to move.
Move quick.
Let's create game assets with prompts. Let's do. All right, fine. Let's vote. All right. All right. So I just want to vote on these items. So you guys ready? Voting has engaged. One vote per person. Can I get a new computer? All right, we got 8 votes. Anybody still voting? Everybody's done? I'm gonna end for all. Read code and generate product documentation. I love it. All right, so let's talk about this. Who's going to be our user in this process of reading code and generate product documentation? Is it a product owner? Is it a we're going to read code and then it's going to generate some documentation. So I'm going to create a tool for product owners where they can engage on it, provide the code from their product, and then it's going to generate all these features and these beautiful things, right? Okay, cool. All right. So let's see how good this, like how prepared Danny is. So the first thing we're going to do, so I've prepared some prompts over here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to tell it to remember, right? So remember who our persona is. So in this case, it's going to be a product owner, which, did you just put that there, Matt? Or did we just predict the future? It says product owner.
Weird.
Man, we're like really good at this because we like predicted the future. All right. So I'm going to gauge GPT-4. And I'm going to say to please, so set, and we're using the brackets here, persona to product owner. Respond with yes when it's done, right? So we're kind of using our prompts and what we've learned. So now it's told us that it's set the product persona, right, to product owner. So we're going to try something really quick. I'm going to ask it to create an empathy map for a product for product, or sorry, for persona. And I'm just going to use just making it up as we go. I'm going to use an API, right? So like an API is invisible to a product owner. So an API is like, I'm a product owner of an API and I need to understand what and create like a feature set or a reason why you should purchase our API, right? When determining what needs an API they are responsible for. Let's say market fit. Determining the market fit for an API they are responsible for. So really quick, it's starting to give me some context, right? So we're going through the empathy map, understanding the market needs, trends, and we're starting to create like some of that context, right? So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it some steps, right? So, and I'm going to tell it, let's think step by step. So again, this is coming back to like, you know, tell it how to think. In this case, like this is the hypothesis format that we use here with our team. It could be whatever hypothesis format you decide to use. But I'm giving it step 1 through step 4. And I'm saying that I want you to think through this problem step by step. So what it'll do is at first determine step 1, and it answers step 1. So we're starting to kind of develop what this business case is. And then I'm going to ask it to write. And that's another thing is like, this is kind of interesting because we think of it as a human being, but also, you know, I'm kind of breaking some rules and we're all learning is like some of the connecting words like actually get in the way as you're creating prompts. Like I'm still learning about that, but like, you don't have to ask it, please.
Yeah.
You don't have to, like, I'm being very formal, but like, actually with Mid-Journey, it's actually better for you to reduce words because it'll add it. So if you tell it, don't put a cat in here, it will put a cat.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the universe. All right. So now I'm going to tell it to write a hypothesis in this format for me. So when I look at here, it doesn't have my persona. Let me make sure. Can you rewrite this hypothesis using the persona and information above? Did it lose that?
Did the data.
So it switched to the data. All right, switch. Oh, that's awesome. So there's us having to guide it to equal product owner and rewrite hypothesis. Beautiful. All right, so now I can just copy, right? I'm not going to evaluate this. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm not going to switch over. Hold on. So we got a hypothesis, right? So we got it quick, simple. We got some insights. Hold on. I feel like my laptop's about to die just like yours.
I know.
So now I can also engage it into summarizing, right? So please summarize the persona user insights. So now I can look at this and say, okay, these are some insights, and I can read through it, right? We want to read through it and evaluate it. And then you can adjust it. You can add it to your presentation. Again, it doesn't replace talking to the to a product owner, but at least now you can create some context and things like that. We've also, I think Chris, since you're on, you've used this kind of like to engage it as a persona, right? For like kind of like, okay, you're a doctor or you're a metallurgist working within, a copper mine, like, tell
Yeah,
us what you would experience, right?
yeah, sure. And I've gathered, data, and then I'll give it like the data set, and then I'll ask it to synthesize like the data into a single user persona. And then like what you just did, depending on the response, I'll like kind of guide it towards more of the output that I'm looking for. And I might change a few things, but for the most part, yeah, it generates like a full-blown user persona out of the data, with like needs, behavioral attributes, pretty much anything you ask it for.
Awesome.
What data set you bring in.
So now I'm going to tell it based like using the information above, right? Using the info above, create a list of how might we's. Let's see what happens. So now it's kind of like helping us kind of ideate, right? What can we solve for? And then what we could do is copy this over into Miro and then vote on it as a group, right? But let's choose one of these. Ensure that our API aligns with both our business, improve our communication. So let's go back to like what we're trying to build, right? So we're trying to build so let's go back to, and this is where we got to make sure, right? We're making sure we're guiding this in the right direction. So we originally came here is to read code and generate product information. So I want to say, can you create a, how might we with the sorry. To better understand market needs, right? Did we lose? Okay, we go. So now I might just take it, okay, now create an 8-step user flow. In this case, I mean, we're just going to say, what is it going to be, like an app, like a mobile app? 8-step user flow of our persona understanding market fit using a mobile app. within code and the how might we above. So in this case, I am using this to replace what we would normally have done in a Crazy 8 sketch or a storyboarding session. So I've got a step, right? So I've got step 1, log into the mobile app, access the code review section, review code, generate product documentation. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin up a new chat, and I'm going to use Chat GPT-4. And then this plugin called Stories. Now, again, like I've learned, it's like when I'm creating images, it's a shotgun approach, and they're not always accurate. And you'll see like this story plugin creates a story, so I can give it what we've created, right? So I can give it, first of all, I'm going to provide the hypothesis. Is this the one that we agreed? No, this is the wrong one. Where is it? Right here. I'm going to give it the hypothesis. And then I'm going to say, write me a story. Oh, wait, I got to switch to ChatGPT. Then I got to go to plugin. And then, so just look up how to add plugins into GPT-4 if you haven't already. So in this, this is Storybird AI. It comes up as stories inside of GPT-4. But I'm going to tell it, write me a story using the following information, right? Now I could tell it more specific, right? Write me a story of a professional within an organization in a, I don't even know, a photorealistic style, right? And then provide the hypothesis. And then I'm going to tell it to write me a story. And as it generates that, I'm going to take these steps here. And I'm going to ask it, write me a story with the information above using these steps. So this one's going to be a little more accurate on what I wanted to create. So what Storyboard does is basically, Storybird is it creates a story for you. And then what I've done is try to take some of those. So what I've done is I've extracted it. So it's most likely using Midjourney. So another way that you could do this is I could take step by step and tell Midjourney within Discord. So I can show you guys how that happens, but let me just generate this really quick. And yes, everything looks cute and anime style. So they're still working on some stuff. But so like this is how I've used it, right? Is I go through and I look at my steps, right? I know the first step is logging in. So it's still generating some of that. So we'll let it continue to generate. Now I could go to Discord. So if anybody's already set up like Midjourney, it's like you have to set it up through Discord. Or you can use Discord. I created my own little server, and then I invited Discord to come and be part of my, what is it called, a server or a channel? I forget, Discord.
It's a server.
It's a server. So that now they're pretty much a participant. So I could say, tell it to create a storyboard. Oh, sorry, so /imagine. Create a story, a photorealistic story using these.
Not on the US Neudesic Discord channel.
Plus. And then I'm gonna jump over here to Chat GPT and I'm gonna get these. So there's the cool thing about this storyboard. So we'll let it play around and see what happens there. And then over here, you start seeing kind of like some images, start generating some images based on the prompt that you gave it. So what I've done is kind of like be able to kind of curate some of these images. So what I'm doing here, and let me share my whole. How do I share the whole desktop?
So you are on it.
Okay, I was already on there. Okay, so you guys saw me jumping around. So what I'm doing is I can take this, right, these step by step, and then it's basically what I'm doing is just really making sure that it reads what I expect it to do. Now, like for example, if you did like an ideation session, the way we did it recently, and the way I did it recently was, I took whatever, because we'll engage the group in creating a crazy 8 sketch. So I'll convert their crazy 8 sketch into step 1 through step 8 and put in the text and then give it to Storybird. And then start kind of putting it into this format, right? So I got my first step, which is right here, and then just start kind of making sure that I follow each one. So it's like, I'm not going to format stuff just because we're moving so fast. And then I was even looking at, there's some tools out there actually generate PowerPoint. So just imagine like, this is us as a human connecting all of this. So then you can create, you know, when you're going into like creating some custom code and things like that, you can actually create, you know, applications and systems and plugins that help create something like, so we could probably create a custom plugin to do this, right? Here's the steps, and then it generates a slide in the format that we like to present, right? So, so I'm just going to do the first 3 steps in this case. So the first step, you know, we got step 1, log into the app. Step 2, access the code review section. This product owner navigates to the code review section. So as I'm looking at over here, okay, that looks pretty decent, but it doesn't, like, I don't like that because it's a pencil, or what is that, like a paintbrush? I don't even know. Hallucination. Okay, maybe this could be my product owner, right? This could be my view of my product owner. And so now I start just kind of taking some images and dropping them into my presentation, right? So so ultimately what I'm doing is just kind of like filtering it myself, and dropping in, you know, here's the beginning. He's logging into his thing, right? So now I don't know about that guy. I don't know about that girl. Oh man, look at this guy. He looks more professional. Yeah, like it just went south, right? I like that. So that looks a little more like accurate, but then again, look at, he's using a notebook, which has nothing to do with what we're trying to do. Okay, so this kind of looks like something, but poor guy, look at him. Like we should have put some emotion on him. He looks tired, disheveled. Meanwhile, let's see, oh man, this guy looks like he's about to hack something. Is that Nero? Neo. So, but so ultimately what I use this is just to kind of help me like generate some imagery that looks similar to what I'm trying to build, right? So I'm probably going to spend some time massaging this. I might re-engage the AI to give me a little bit different ones. I might like go back and look at Discord. Let's look at Discord, what it created for me. Okay. I don't like any of this.
I don't like it.
I mean, that's interesting, but there's like nothing really great. So, but ultimately what you can do is, let me see, let's go over here to, let's look at the first one that it created, or did it stop creating it for me?
It blew up.
Yeah. So, and then I could say, write me a story using, so now I'm looking at some of the keywords. Acts as the code review section, product owner navigates. Write me a story with code and mobile app navigation, right? So now I'm being specific to it. What is going on? Okay, that's weird. All right, I'm gonna get something. The Coding Chronicles. Well, without sitting here and watching paint dry.
Yeah.
So this is how we've kind of like, what normally would have either, you know, we would have had to go and search for images, search for things, maybe even create our own. It's really helping us kind of, it's very much helping us, you know, speed up our process, right? So in this case, we've created a lot of context. Imagine if you're kind of spending some time kind of engaging it, right?
At least give you ideas.
Yeah.
Like, go out and like possibly do an auto or something and find photos of
Yeah.
people that have a phone in their hand, you know, and you can get to that point too.
Some of the ways that we've done it, like we do these workshops where you identify your goals and risks. We put the goals and risks and then we ask it to create a success statement, and that just spits it out quickly, and it's pretty accurate on that side. What other things have we done? You know, one of the things is like from a research perspective, you know, obviously make sure that there's no data there that's not publicly available. We've used it with like comments that are publicly available. Like if you go to, you know, a customer that you're dealing with that's in retail and you want to get some insights, you can just copy all the comments that are in there that are available, and then ask it to give you sentiment. What's the sentiment as it pertains to this company? What's the sentiment as it pertains to this product? So there's a lot of use cases that you can do. And this is one of those that really sped up, like, you know, how do we come back with little to no effort to be able to, you know, to be able to summarize what we found and then be able to capture the idea that came of the workshop. So, and then present it in a way that looks professional, that people will stop and say, okay, what is this? And then be able to get that. So this is a quick way for you to capture any crazy idea that you have that you want to present to someone, or that you want to sell to an executive or anything like that. So
It's great for like pre-discovery. So
Yeah.
you don't have a lot of information related to the customer or the client. It can be great as a good starting point.
general,
Yeah,
right, yeah,
great
it's just
starting
general
point
stuff.
to really get the conversation started, right?
There's one thing, but you have to be careful with this, if anybody can hear me, but if you want to do interviews with people, you just got to make sure the information is locked down so it doesn't go out to the internet, you know, with certain, you know, conversations. But, you know, with Teams, we're able to record the meetings and the interviews, and it'll actually, you know, produce a transcription, and you just throw that transcription inside of ChatGPT and say, hey, pull out all the pain points, pull out all the goals, pull out sentiment type analysis on that, and it'll go through it and give you, almost, if you write it right, it'll give you everything at once. So it's actually pretty
It's very helpful. We use that all the time.
There's also another feature I want to try out is where you provide a sketch. So like next time we do like a crazy 8 sketch or anything like that, and you just provide it as a context and tell it to create something off of that. Like, I wonder how accurate that would be, and things like that. So, all right, guys, that's all we had for today, but just kind of wanted to show you how we're kind of using it. You can provide it the steps, you can give it some context, and then you can engage it as another collaborator within your tool set, right? So
Anybody have any questions?